Not on. Oh, there I'm on. Psalm 124, excuse me. Can't even read. How many of you have sung that song before? Okay, yeah. I know we've sung it here before. I don't know if it was just on a Wednesday night or not, but it's one of the ones we tried to learn. So it's a really beautiful song. And again, it comes right out of Psalm 124. See if I can get this thing to progress here without changing. Let's see. Oh, I don't worky here. Hey, Ray. There we go. Thank you, brother. So today we're going to be looking at songs for the pilgrim journey. And then I didn't change the bottom part where it says Psalms 119. That was really good of me. It should be Psalms 120 through 134. 120 through 134. How many Psalms is that? 15. 15 Psalms. And they're referred to as the songs of the ascent. And that's due to the superscription, and we know the superscription was added after the fact. But the way that they were organized into the book of Psalms is that, or into the Psalter, is that they put the common ones together. And so these common ones, these 15, are called the songs of the ascent. They're also known as the pilgrim songs. And of these, David is attributed to writing 4, and Solomon is attributed to writing 1 of these. In Hebrew, they would call this Shirim Hamalat. Shirim Hamalat, because they all start that way. All except one of them, and it is a slight variation. Yes, sir?
It might be helpful to know that in the Hebrew Bible, all of the superscriptions are given verse numbers. And so when you're looking for a verse number that you're familiar with, it won't be the same number in the Hebrew Bible. And in many foreign languages, they do the same thing.
Good point. Okay. If Dan was here, we would talk about coincidence. Him and I have this running gag about coincidence in the Bible, and how throughout the Bible there's coincidences, which there are not. There's no coincidence with God. God orchestrates these things. Why do you think there was 15? Just an arbitrary number? There always is a reason, she says. Here's some thoughts. 15 is the number of Yah. What's Yah? It's short for Yehovah. What's Yehovah? God. Jehovah's, we would say. But in Hebrew, it's Yah. Okay, they would say Yah as an abbreviated form of Jehovah. Okay? Well, how do I know that's 15? If you were in my Job class, we talked about it. If you were in my Revelation class, we talked about it. And we talked a little bit about it here. All Hebrew letters and Greek letters come with a numeric value. Okay? They all have numeric values. Aleph, which is, we would say, the beginning of their alphabet, has a value of 1. Bet, it's 2. Gamil, 3. Hey and Yod is 10 and 15. 10 and 15 is, 10 and 5 is 15. Okay? So Yah is 15. What a coincidence. Also, these Psalms, or these 15 Psalms, they're connected to the Sukkot, okay? The Sukkot is the Feast of the Tabernacles. When is it celebrated? It's celebrated on the 15th day of the 7th month. Okay? 15th day of the 7th month. What a coincidence. Well, what is the Feast of the Tabernacles? What's that? Okay. It's a harvest feast, okay? It's one of the major celebrations of the Jewish nation, okay? And it celebrates what? What are they? The harvest, but it's other things too. What else? It's the time they celebrated because they lived in booths and tents. Why would the Jews ever live in tents and booths? In the wilderness, okay? They had no permanent dwelling place. I think it's interesting that it's called tabernacle, because most of us, when we think of tabernacle, we think of what? The temple, okay? We think of the temple. Tabernacle means tent, okay? It's a celebration of the Day of the Tents, or the Feast of the Tents. And so, three things were there. It coincided with the completion of the year's harvest, okay? It was about the tents. They were man-made temporary dwellings, which reminded them of their wandering in the wilderness. And then it was about sacrifice. And God required his people to bring costly sacrifices to this feast. All right? So that's what the Feast of the Tabernacles was all about. It's a very significant day in the life of the Jews, okay? Celebrated even today, all right? And today is why it's called Sukkot, is what they call it today. They don't call it Feast of the Tabernacles or Booth, most likely, or most often. Then ironically, there's 15 steps between the court of women and the court of Israel. What is that? What's the court of women and the court of Israel?
Kind of an outer and inner court.
Okay. The temple, all right? You have the court of the women, okay? And you have the court of Israel, okay? And you notice there's steps going out from the court of the women to the court of Israel. Guess how many steps there are? 15. How do they get to the temple? Which direction do they go? Up. They do what? Do they descend? They ascend. Okay, they ascend. Interesting, isn't it? So 15 Psalms on 15 steps on the 15th night in the name of God, whose number is 15. That is such a coincidence. No coincidences. God gives us all sorts of things like this to help us remind us to get our mind turned back to him. The remembrances of the tabernacle or the tents and their wanderings. That's why they have this feast, so they remember where they came from, what they went through. How about you and I? What kind of remembrances do we have in the church today? Do we have any? We have the Lord's Supper. Okay? We have the Lord's Supper. Very similar to many of the things that they did. We have the Lord's Supper, which does what? It's a remembrance of Christ's sacrifice for you and I, okay? That's what it's about. Let me read this to you real quick. I thought this was interesting. This is from the Talmud, okay? Beginning on the 15th of the 7th month on a Sunday, the feast significance can be seen in that's the wrong one, sorry. Let me change pages. There we go. The pious men and wonder workers would dance before them, their flaming torches in their hand. They would sing before the songs and praises. And the Levites played on harps, lyres, cymbals, trumpets, and other musical instruments beyond counting, standing as they played on the 15 steps which go down from the Israelites' court to the women's court, corresponding to the 15 songs of the ascents, which are in the book of Psalms. On these, the Levites would stand with their instruments and sing their song. And the two priests stood at the upper gate, which goes down to the Israelites' court, to the women's court, with two trumpets in their hands. And when the cock crowed, they sounded a sustained, quavering, sustained blast on the shofar. And they got on the 10th step, they sounded a sustained, quavering, and sustained blast on the shofar. And they reached the courtyard, they sounded a sustained and quavering and sustained blast on the shofar. They went on sounding the shofar in a sustained blast until they reached the gate which leads out to the east. When they reached the gate that goes out to the east, they turned around toward the west, and they said, Our fathers who were in this place turned their backs toward the temple of the Lord, and their faces toward the east, and they worshiped the sun towards the east. But as to us, our eyes are toward the Lord. So that comes from the Talmud on how they would celebrate this Feast of the Tabernacles. The singing and reciting the songs of the ascent. One person, or one scholar says that there were Levites on each of the steps, and each step was assigned one of these 15 psalms. And that's what they would be singing. So you can kind of get in your mind this impression of how this was all being done, okay? But it was also done by the people who were going to Jerusalem to celebrate this feast. They would recite these as they went. And that's why they're called pilgrim songs as well, is because as they progressed their way to Jerusalem, they would sing these songs. Where's Jerusalem from a geographic standpoint to the rest of Israel? Up, okay? Up. And so they would be going up. They would be ascending to the temple. That's where they were all headed, okay? It was important for them to go to the temple to worship and to have this celebration. And so they would, as they ascended, they would sing these songs, okay? Here are the 15. Psalm 120, it's about our deliverer. 121, our security. 122, our joy and our peace. 123, our focus. 124, our defender. 125, our protector. 126, O Jerusalem. 127, our provider. 128, our source. 129, our guardian. 130, our redeemer. 131, our hope. 132, our dwelling. 133, our unity. 134, our blessing. What do you think the writers of the psalm were trying to convey with these? What is it they're trying to say? What was God trying to get us to see? He is everything that we need. Everything that you could possibly need is there. And that's what these psalms are about. Sharing everything that God has done for us and for them and all that we need. And singing them reassures those. Just as we sing here every morning or every Sunday morning and have songs, okay, they remind us of who God is, what God has done, and helps us worship him. Psalm 121. I lift up my eyes to the mountains. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. He will not let my foot slip. He who watches over you will not slumber. Indeed, he who watches over Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord watches over you. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. The sun will not harm you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from harm. He will watch over your life. The Lord will watch over your coming and going, both now and forever. What does this psalm say to you? What's that?
You have nothing to worry about.
Kathy says we have nothing to worry about. That's what it says to her. She has nothing to worry about. Those are easy words, aren't they? I have nothing to worry about. God says he takes care of everything. Right? None of us have any. We don't have to worry, right? So we can move on. Doesn't work like that, okay? Okay? And that's why they wrote these psalms down, okay? Because we forget. And we do worry, and we do get anxious, and we do fear. And yet God is there to remind us, you don't need to. I know you want to, but you don't need to. It's a hymn of thanksgiving, and basically it was written in two voices. One representing a individual singer, and then the respondent. And he talks about how God is ever vigilant. He's the ever vigilant creator. He's not just somebody who's ever vigilant, okay? We have people who are ever vigilant. We say the police and the fire department, they're ever vigilant, right? But he's an ever vigilant creator. What makes that significant? Why is that significant?
He understands us inside and out.
He knows us like no one else knows us. God knows us. He knows our needs. He knows our fears. He knows our wants. He knows our doubts. He created us. He knows us. Verse 3 personalizes this help. He says, he will not let my foot slip. He will not even slumber. He's always there. He never slumbers. He never sleeps. He's always aware. Hebrews 13:5. What does that say? Hebrews 13:5. Kathy's iPadding it real quick.
It says, keep your lives.
I can't hear you.
Keep your lives free from love of money and be content with what you have because of God. As said, you will never will I leave you, never will I forsake you.
So it quotes these verses, okay, this verse, it quotes it. He says that we should be free from the love of money and we should be content with all we have. Why? Because he's always there. God's always there to take care of us. He's always there to watch over us and to protect us. The second half of this, the second stanza, as they called it, moves into, talks about God protecting his children from trouble and unseen dangers and how he's our keeper. What does it mean to be kept? Okay, taken care of, guarded, protected. The word guard, keep, I mean, that whole concept, which is a Hebrew word shamar, is used 6 times in the final 5 verses. Okay? You think he was trying to convey something to us by using the word 6 times? He's there to protect us. He's there to guard us. He's there to keep us. That's who our God is, okay? And it's why in the New Testament we see over and over again, it says, do not be anxious about anything. Don't worry about stuff. Don't worry about what you're going to wear, where you're going to live, or what you're going to eat. Why? Why don't we have to worry about those things? I mean, I got to have a job. I don't, but you guys do. I need money, God. I gotta have a place to live. I gotta have a place to eat. What's God telling us in those verses? He's telling us not to worry, but why? He's got me. God has got us, okay? He will take care of us. He will provide. We get so wrapped up in material things in this world and about making our life the way we want it, we forget that the really important thing is what? It's following God. He moves on. He talks a little bit about shade, which is an interesting word. Verse 5, the Lord watches over you. The Lord is your shade. What does that mean to you? He's your shade. Well, if you're bald, okay, right? If you're bald, or you're fair skinned, or you're a ginger, okay, shade is extremely important. Why?
Protects you from sunburn.
Sunburn and worse, okay? Just ask some of us that have gone through some of these things from the sun, okay? Shade is important, and it was important in a land where we're blasting by sun, okay, all the time. Shade was important. And it also brings back many of the other Psalms where he talks about as a mother hen and her wings covering. It's this protection concept, okay, that God is there. He's covered us. He's got us protected. And so that's kind of the whole idea he's giving us here, is that he protects us from calamity, from injury, from distress. He protects us from immorality. He protects us from the disasters of life. He says that we can depend on God. That's what he's telling us. We can depend on him.
This is one of those scriptures that you can go to when you are being anxious, when you've got trouble in your life, whatnot, and read it.
Peggy said this is one of those scriptures when you're having troubles, you're having doubts, you're having things go wrong in your life, that you can go to reassure yourself that it isn't on you. You don't have to worry. You don't have to carry that burden. God's going to carry it for you. 126. When the Lord restored the fortunes of Zion, we were like those who dreamed. Our mouths were filled with laughter, our tongues with songs of joy. Then it is said among the nations, the Lord has done great things for them. The Lord has done great things for us, and we are filled with joy. Restore our fortunes, Lord, like streams in the Negev. Those who sow with tears will reap with joys, with songs of joy. Those who go out weeping, carrying seeds to sow, will return with songs of joy, carrying sheaves with them. This is considered a community hymn, and it's one of our community lament. It's only one of two laments or community laments within the Songs of the Ascent. And it begins so often as so many of the Psalms begin with a remembrance. What is he remembering?
They're moved when they came from Egypt and they restored Israel.
Okay. And is that the only time God restored them? When else did he restore them?
When they came back from Babylon.
When they came back from Babylon, okay? God restored them. It's a remembrance that these people have that says, he's restored our fortunes, okay? We were like those who dreamed. Many of these people who left Egypt never saw their dream realized. All they had was a dream. That's all they had. They were told that they were going to have a promised land, but because of their disobedience, they never got to receive that, did they? But they dreamed of it, and they spoke of it to their children, and their children realized it. And so this psalm is a psalm about restoration. It's about deliverance and the great things that God does for each one of us. When we ask God to restore our lives, what's his response? Have we ever asked God to restore our lives? No. We don't ask God to restore our lives
Every time we pray.
when we pray. When we accept Jesus Christ as our Savior, do we not ask God to restore our life? Make us who we really are supposed to be? And so it's about restoration. When you were restored, when you accepted Jesus, were you pretty sad about that, weren't you? You probably like, man, I'm all wet now. Doggone it. These are my best jeans. No, what was your response when you were dipped into that water, whether it was an ice cold water out at Delano Bay or a nice warm bathtub, someplace else? What was your response? Joy. Joy. That joy of being restored, of being who God wants you to be. That's what it was all about. And that's what they're singing about here, about being restored to God. In 1967, some of us were alive. I was barely born then, I think. I think it was June 6th. Don't quote me on that. For the first time in almost 2,000 years, the Israelites were able to stand on Temple Mount in front of the wall of the temple for the first time. This is the psalm that they read and sang. Why would they do that?
They were restored to their homeland.
Because they, after 2,000 years, were restored to their homeland, back to Jerusalem. Okay? Now, I'm not going to get into the Israeli and all that stuff, but God always chose the Israelites. They are his people. Okay? They are still his people. Okay? They may be an erring people, but they're still his people. And he will always love them as his people. Just as he loves you and I, even though we err. There is joy in being restored to the Lord. And there's joy that we all experience when we see somebody else restored to the Lord. This psalm is known for one particular song in our hymn books. We don't sing it much anymore. We sing it, but not very often. Can you guess which song that is?
Bringing in the sheep.
Bringing in the sheaves. Bringing in the sheaves. How many of you remember that song? Yeah, we don't sing it too often, but it's one of the, and that's the inspiration, is this particular psalm. We can't dwell long on any of these ones, and so we're kind of moving through them. 127. Unless the Lord builds the house, the builders labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the guards stand watch in vain. In vain you rise early and stay up late, toiling for food to eat. For he grants sleep to those he loves. Children are a heritage from the Lord, offspring a reward from him. Like arrows in the hands of a warrior, our children are born in one's youth. Blessed is a man whose quiver is full of them. They will not be put to shame when they contend with their opponents in court. See one word there quite frequently in the first two verses, vain. When you see the word vain, who do you think of? What writer do you think of? Who? Why?
All of vanity.
Vanity, vanity, all is vanity. Where do we find that? In Ecclesiastes, okay? He says it over and over again. This psalm is attributed to Solomon, okay? Okay, in the superscript, it's attributed to Solomon. And he says that there are so much vain things out there, okay? It's considered a wisdom song, obviously, if it comes from Solomon. How might this particular psalm help us understand our efforts, our individual efforts in life? We can do nothing on our own. We can do all sorts of stuff on our own. But can we do them effectively? Can we do them worthwhile? How about as a church? Have you ever seen programs that people say, this just isn't working? The congregation says, this just isn't working. We've tried this, and it's just not working. We're not reaching people. We're losing people. What does this might say about that? That's too personal. What about a nation? What about a nation that you see continue to go downhill, okay, get worse and worse? What does it say about that? Unless the Lord builds the house, it's what? It's in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city and guards the gates, it's in vain. Once you turn your back to God, everything you do is a waste of your time. He's saying you've got to be focused. You've got to walk with God to make things important, to make things really count. Our lives only matter if God's a part of it. Other than that, our lives are really worthless. They really are. What's interesting is the second stanza, he goes into children. Dan's like, yes. Remember, he says, and I think this is interesting, you're very rich if you have lots of children. So if you need money, go see Dan. He's very wealthy. No, that's not what he's saying, okay? He's saying you're blessed if your quiver is full of children. If you have children, your quiver is full. It's interesting that he puts that after these opening verses. How does it even relate? How does that even relate to each other? Yes, ma'am?
The very first thing he said to mankind was, have babies.
He says, be fruitful, multiply.
Abraham was
Okay.
upset because he said, Lord, you blessed me, but I have children.
I have no children, Lord. Abraham understood that. He understood what God had said, but Abraham had no children. And he said, I don't get it, God. Here I am an old man. Now I'm too old to have children. So he thought. Yes, sir.
The connection to the first two verses is they are not yours to program like robots. They are free. You should build all
But what can we do? Excuse me. What can we do? According to these verses.
I can wait for the Lord. I can pray to the Lord.
We can pray to the Lord. We're basically building our children. When we make children, when we have children in our lives, we're basically building them. Right? They come out as this little squally, little nasty little pink thing or brown thing or black thing or whatever. They come out, they're just nasty. As David said, it doesn't look like my niece. It doesn't look like my nephew. It looks like a baby. Right? That's how most guys look at it. It looks like a baby to me. Okay. Oh, it looks like Aunt Judy. No. Look like a wrinkly mess. No. They come out and they have to be built. They're not self-sustaining. They have to be built. You have to add things to them. You have to develop them. You have to make them more than what they are. Yes, sir.
There's a passage in 1 Timothy, and when we first read it, especially in this culture, it's kind of shocking. He's talking about all the organizational stuff, the administrative of the church. And then he talks about women and says they will be saved through a word that is called childbearing in English versions, but it's technogonias. It's the building
Of children.
It's exactly the word you're using.
Yep.
It's not just the childbearing, it's the whole building of the character of the next generation.
Exactly. And so people who cannot have children, women who may not be able to bear a child, I've heard them say, that this is unfair, this is bad. He's not saying that. He's saying every one of us can build a child. Every one of us can build a child. We don't have to be a woman to build a child. We don't have to be a husband or a father. You don't have to be a mother. You can still build a child. We have that capability because God gave it to us, and our responsibility is to build a child, to reach out and lift those. Now, who's a child? Only these little runts that run around? See how much I enjoy them.
It goes throughout the life.
It goes throughout their lifespan. From the moment they're born to the moment they pass, we are all children of God. And so it has to do with us building them. What are we building them for? What are we doing? We're building them for heaven. We're preparing them for heaven. That's the whole point of this. And that's why he links these two together about building children. And the one that builds with a whole nest, a whole quiver, he's really blessed.
And it benefits all of society.
And it benefits not only them, it benefits us, and it benefits all of society.
And
Point.
if we follow best practices and we use scientific research, like for instance, the research is crystal clear that children that are raised without an involved father go off course. It's important for us as a society, even secular people like Elon Musk has recently said things about the problem that humanity is facing is population collapse because we as in 2024 we don't value human life. In so many cultures, we glorify abortion.
He's saying that in our society we're seeing a bigger and a larger and larger breakdown of the family unit, basically summarizing what you're saying. And how that is not only destroying families, but it's destroying our society. It's destroying our nation. It is a horrible thing to happen, but it is what is happening. And it's our responsibility as Christians to help build people. Yes, sir.
One last thing, in that last verse, if a man's quiver is full, then he has a lot of children who have relationships with each other. That's where he gets to the point. The children will not be put to shame when they contend with their enemies in the game. Is that it's the children helping each other in that next generation.
We don't see large families for the most part today. Everybody's worried about money and about having a style of living and stuff. In an agrarian society prior to this century, it was very common for families to have multiple children because they used them as helpmates. I mean, they used them as people to help them work their land, to do their jobs. That's what they were there for. You know, that was part of the whole big family concept. And sometimes we lose sight of that family unit working together. Moving on. Out of the depths I cry to you, Lord. Lord, hear my voice. Let your ears be attentive to my cry for mercy. If the Lord kept a record of sins, Lord, who could stand? But with you there is forgiveness, so that we can with reverence serve you. I wait for you, Lord. My whole being waits, and in his words I put my hope. I wait for you, Lord, more than watchmen wait for the morning, more than watchmen wait for the morning. Israel, put your hope in the Lord, for with the Lord is unfailing love, and with him is full redemption. He himself will redeem Israel from all their sins. It's a psalm about guilt. Being guilty or feeling guilt is like drowning. Would you agree with that? Feeling guilt or feeling guilty is like drowning. Why? Well, guilt is self-sustaining. Okay? Guilt is self-sustaining. You let it run unchecked, and what will happen? You'll feel more guilty. You'll feel worse. That's what it does. They say many of the illnesses that you see in hospitals and other places are from guilt that eat us alive, okay? As Christians, we can feel guilt, okay? Should we feel guilt? What is our response? Should be our response as Christians to guilt? To change and to confess. Confess. You feel guilty, why? Because you violated your conscience, the law of God. You've done something that you're ashamed of. You feel guilt. Okay? The only way to get rid of that is through Jesus. That's it. You can't get rid of it any other way. You can try and forget it, but it never goes away. Betty?
I was just going to say, Peter, when he did something wrong, would come to Jesus, they would talk about it. And he went on. It doesn't say anywhere that Judas ever came to Jesus and talked about it.
Yep. Good point. That is a really good point. You feeling guilty? Sometimes we feel guilty for no reason, actually. I mean, we just feel guilty. Go to Jesus. Tell him how you feel. And he has promised. He didn't say he would. He promised he would help you relieve that, get rid of that guilt. He takes it all upon himself. The reason Israel is told to wait expectantly, okay, and they're told over and over again, that's the common word you see here, right? Wait, wait, wait. What does that tell you about God?
He's taking care of it.
It's done in his time, okay? We all want everything done now, right now. We live in a now society, all right? We want it now. Have it your way and have it right now. That's how we believe. That's not who God is. God works in his time. He knows when the best time is. He knows when to respond to you, and that's what he's telling us here, is that he will respond in his time. And we know he's going to respond because of his hasad. Dan, his hasad, what is it?
That's a love and a trustworthiness. That's it.
Okay? It's a love and trust. Yours may say loving kindness or something else, but it goes beyond that. It's who God is. We can trust God's going to forgive our guilt because it's who he is. He doesn't want us to feel bad. He doesn't want us in guilt. He wants us to be loved as his children. So God says wait, and wait expectantly. You're not just waiting for no reason. You're waiting because you know God's going to answer. That's what it's all about. God's going to answer you. Don't give up. Keep praying. How many times should I pray, God? Continuously. That's what he says. Pray continuously. God will answer. And again, we could talk so much about all of these, but getting through them that we're talking about. So, how good and pleasant it is when God's people live together in unity. It is like precious oil poured on the head, running down on the beard, running down on Aaron's beard, down on the collar of his robe. It is as if dew of Hermon were falling on Mount Zion, for there the Lord bestows his blessings, even life forevermore. There's some imagery there that not being Jewish and not being raised in Judaism seemed puzzling a little bit to us. Aren't you waiting for the oil to run onto your beard? Women are like, I ain't got no beard. What is he talking about? What is he talking about? The oil flowing down and poured oil on his head and it runs down to his beard, like Aaron's beard. And what does it mean? What happened in Exodus?
That's where God told Moses, this is how you're supposed to do to anoint Aaron as the high priest.
Okay, it's talking about Aaron's anointment as the high priest and the oil poured upon his head, okay? Olive oil, something that was very precious to them, that flowed down his head, onto his beard, and onto his robe. It was a blessing, okay? It was a blessing. It's a good and pleasant blessing. And that's what unity is. It's something that's good. It's something that's pure. It's something that we've forgotten a whole lot about. It's about goodness and pleasantness. The two words he uses are oil and dew. We know what dew is. We see it every morning when we wake up. But for them, dew had a little bit more of a strong connotation because it was such an arid country. And so when they saw dew that came from Mount Hermon, which is up near Damascus, it's one of the tallest mountains. They actually ski on that mountain, which I was surprised. In the Middle East, they're actually skiing. It actually has a ski resort on it. It's over 9,000 feet in elevation. And it's so high that it collects clouds, and those clouds then benefit Jerusalem by passing dew onto their land. That's what he's talking about. And the dew does what? What does dew do for them? What does dew do for them? That's like that. What does it do for them? It moistens the ground, which makes the ground what? Fertile. Which makes, if his ground is fertile, that doesn't mean anything unless you water, unless you plant, unless you grow, unless you mature. Okay? That's what unity is all about. We forget this whole message of unity in the church. I watched a film this week, actually two of them, Tortured for Christ and Sabina. I don't know if any of you have ever seen either one of those. Anybody? Tortured for Christ? Tortured for Christ and Sabina. Worthwhile watching. Okay? Not members of the church. So, probably you can just wipe it away, right? Which we do a lot of times about other religious stuff, It's not Church of Christ, so brush that aside. It's about a man named Richard Wurmbrand and his wife Sabina. The first movie is about them in Romania under the Nazi rule and what they did and how they survived. They were neither Christian, they were Jews, okay? But he knew his life there was something wrong with his life. He knew it wasn't what he wanted it to be. They were partiers, they were having great times, they had money. He didn't want that anymore. He knew he was missing something, and he finds Jesus. Okay, well, it wasn't the Church of Christ, so maybe he didn't find Jesus, right? I don't know. He finds Jesus. His wife thinks he's a nut. But he loves her, and he cares for her, and he prays for her, and she finds Jesus. Under the Nazi regime, you can imagine what that was like, because they knew their duty was to help other people, including the Jews, which they did. And they were persecuted for, and they were thrown in jail for multiple times, and they were beaten. That's the end of the first book. That's Sabina, or the first movie. The second one, if you know anything about that part of the world, Romania kicks the Nazis out, and what happens to them? They welcome communism in, which was more devastating to them than the Nazis were. And so in this case, what are they doing? They're showing love to the Nazis who had been persecuting them. What? And it goes on to talk about Richard Wurmbrand being jailed for 14 years, tortured continuously, and always preaching Jesus Christ in prison. And every time they would be caught singing or preaching, he would be beaten. I wished he was a member of the church. This book is an interesting book. Okay, it's an old book now. Cultural Church by F. LaGard Smith, but it makes you think. If someone is preaching Jesus and they don't have it all right, do I discount them?
Read Philippians 1:18.
And what does that say? Philippians 1:18, he says. What does that say?
Let me quote it just here.
If they're not doing everything the way you and I would do it, are we to dismiss them?
Philippians 1:18.
Loud.
What then? Only that in every way, whether in pretense or in truth, Christ is proclaimed, and in that I rejoice.
Christ is proclaimed. I don't know how God is going to judge all of mankind. I know what he's told me and what I need to believe, okay? And so I know what the truth is for me, that I need to repent and be baptized and walk with him. I don't know at what point God's going to cut that off and say, well, you didn't do this part of it and you didn't do this part of it. But I guarantee you, I'm not doing everything that he told me to do. I guarantee you are not either. And so where does God draw the line? I don't know. We have to do the best we can in God's word. But those who are trying to serve God, we aren't to discourage them. We aren't to degrade them. Because we all serve one God, and that's what we are to be thinking about. That's what this is about. It's about unity, guys. It's about being together. We can't even be unified so oftentimes in our own fellowship because, well, they did this and that, so I'm going to go over here to this congregation. Yes, sir.
When I was in Russia, I had a 15-year-old girl come to me that she wanted to be baptized. I said, why? She said, well, there's sin in my life. I said, well, what does that do? She said, it separates me from God. I said, well, what's baptism going to do? It's going to take that barrier away. I said, well, I understand you worship with a group back in your hometown. Tell me about it. Well, we worship God, we pray, we sing, we read the Bible. I said, well, did someone come and teach you these things? Was there evangelists? He said, I told you, we read the Bible.
We read the Bible. That's our guide. God wants us to be united as a people. Rather than us fighting among ourselves and among other churches, it's important that we all strive to serve God, that we all proclaim Jesus Christ. Okay? We can work out the details as we go. The key is speak Jesus. Okay? Next week is our last week of this class, Psalms 135 through 150. You never thought we'd get to 150, did you? Me neither. Focus on 137, 139, and 150. Okay? Appreciate your attention, and we're late. Sorry for the teachers. Okay.